Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Ji-yoon in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of today's highlights. Korea's consumer price index in February rose 1.9% from a year earlier as prices of oil-related products picked up. The U.S. Federal Reserve may be setting the stage for a possible rate hike this month as data shows stronger inflation and manufacturing activity. We have these stories and more coming right up. Korea's inflation rate continued its faster than expected growth pace last month, less because of skyrocketing produce prices, as has been the case in recent months, but largely because of rising oil prices. Our Shin Se-min starts us off.
Korea's consumer prices jumped 1.9% on year in February, staying relatively high for 2 straight months. This is a slight dip from the 2% it logged the month before, the first time it reached this level since 2012. Inflation had been floating in the 1% range since September after escaping the 0% range in the months before. The higher figure in February is largely due to rising oil prices, and despite a slight tapering off in high food prices that drove up inflation the month before.
Global oil prices were under $30 in 2016, but they've since rebounded to the $50 range, pushing up the cost of oil-related products.
The price of petroleum products surged over 13% on year last month, logging the fastest pace of growth since November 2011. Prices of farm goods went up 4.3%. And the surge in fresh produce was nearly 5%, but the price pressure was markedly lower than the double-digit rise registered since September. But some analysts believe this strong trend that had even triggered concerns about stagflation will not last long.
The current economic circumstances are more like a trend of disinflation, because without the high food price factor that has led up as of the first month this year, and without the skyrocketing global oil prices, this conflict we're seeing in slow demand and high inflation won't continue.
The expert adds that the country's economy will soon return to a steady path of growth, as fast recovering exports will make up for other areas that are lagging. This is likely why the government is optimistic that the country maintain its 2% level inflation rate for this year. But the finance ministry has cautioned against further fluctuations in oil prices and warns that the country's livestock goods will also need to be monitored in the face of the recent foot and mouth disease outbreak. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
Korea's services balance deficit soared to a record high in January on the back of an increase in overseas trips during the winter holidays. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's current account surplus stood at over $5.2 billion in January, representing a surplus for 59 months in a row. The services account deficit hit a record high of $3.3 billion compared to a deficit of $1.8 billion a year ago. The central bank says sagging performance in the shipping sector and a deficit in the trade of intellectual property also contributed. In terms of the goods account, the surplus narrowed to $7.8 billion. China's protest against Seoul's decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system appears to be getting more intense by the day. And this could deal a heavy blow to Korea's tourism industry, which depends heavily on Chinese visitors. Our Lee Joo-young has this report.
In its latest set of actions believed to be in retaliation of Seoul's THAAD deployment, the Chinese government has instructed travel agencies in the country to stop selling tour packages to South Korea. Industry sources say the China National Tourism Administration called travel agencies in Beijing for a meeting on Thursday, giving them direct instructions to suspend sales of all travel packages, both online and offline. This is seen as another blatant move in protest against Seoul's decision to deploy an advanced U.S. anti-missile defense system on the peninsula. In addition, the state-run agency told the travel agencies to exhaust those packages that have already been sold by mid-March. Industry sources add the measure will likely be expanded to travel agencies based in other cities. As a result, Chinese tourists will only be able to travel to South Korea on individual trips, buying tickets and making reservations on their own. This is expected to deal a direct blow to Korea's tourism industry. Late last year, the Chinese government instructed a reduction of 20% on the number of people going on group trips to South Korea, one of the most popular tourist destinations among Chinese travelers. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And moving on to markets, to give us a wrap-up of this week's stock market action, we have our Business Daily's markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok, joining us on the phone today. Hello, Jin-seok.
Thanks for having me.
So as we close the week, how are things looking on the last day of trading?
Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market plummeted on the last session of the week. The Kospi fell sharply by 1.1%, closed at 2078.75, while the Kosdaq followed with a 1.3% correction. This is after the U.S. stock market overnight ended with a negative picture, as expectations for an interest rate hike in March have surged, and there have been heightened worries about China's recent measures on Korean tourism, reportedly in relation to the THAAD deployment. Both factors negatively affected sentiment among foreign and institutional investors. Due to the decision by Beijing, companies related to consumption and Chinese tourism were hit the most. The list includes Hana Tour, Hotel Shilla, Shinsegae, and cosmetics companies.
Then how was the overall weekly performance? Today's drop clearly reversed recent positive trends.
Exactly. On a weekly basis, both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market plummeted by a relatively large margin. The Kospi market had enjoyed a 0.4% rise until Thursday, but today's drop negatively affected the entire weekly performance. Throughout the week, foreign investors bought shares while retail investors and institutions unloaded shares on the Kospi market. By sector, shipbuilding, hardware, and steel companies performed strongly, while media, daily staples, and distribution companies performed relatively weakly.
And as we've witnessed from recent market movements, the entire picture still seems to be mixed. So what are some of the positive and negative factors in the market right now?
The current equity market has been on a roller coaster ride over the last two sessions. This shows how mixed the sentiment among investors is. On the one hand, U.S. President Donald Trump mitigated concerns over extreme policies and trade protectionism through his first speech to Congress. This helped erase uncertainty in global financial markets. Also, Korea's February export numbers were robust as expected, lifting the sentiment among foreign investors on the Korean market. However, uncertainty surrounding China's response to Korea's THAAD deployment remains in the market. Moreover, as more investors and experts are betting on a March rate hike by the U.S. Fed, commodity prices are expected to fluctuate in the near term. Therefore, experts still think the Korean market will go higher in the long term, but advise investors to be rather prudent until such uncertainty fades away. This has been Choi Jin-seok for Business Daily.
The world's largest trade show in the mobile industry has wrapped up in Barcelona. Visitors got their hands on the latest tech, including virtual reality and 4D. And industry experts also discussed what's going to be the next element in mobile technology. Our Kim Min-ji reports from the scene.
In the not-too-distant future, you won't have to queue up for hours at a theme park for the thrill of riding a roller coaster. You'll be able to enjoy the same rush from your VR device. One of the best parts about being at the Mobile World Congress is getting to try all the state-of-the-art technology yourself. Check out this plane ride. It's not at all like the 4D machines you find in arcades. This is a whole other level of sophistication.
It was a fantastic experience. Actually, you feel like you are inside of the plane and you see how the plane goes up and down and how it does the looping and everything. So it's a really nice experience, and because you really feel the experience of being piloting a plane, absolutely.
Now that we've been on a plane, how about strapping into a roller coaster whizzing through the depths of space?
I'm not going to miss out the opportunity to try out this VR roller coaster. Let's see if it can match up to the real thing.
It flips from one side to the other, it spins fast, turns 360 degrees, offering a bumpy experience, just like you'd expect from a real roller coaster. Although the graphics are crisp, some artificial wind rushing through your hair could add the finishing touch. If you haven't got the stomach for extreme rides, how about some sporting action? Wearing this device, it actually feels as though your competitor is right in front of you, even making you duck instinctively when he takes a swing at you.
It felt really good. The experience was really real, and although the graphics weren't so real, it was really fun, really fun.
These are some of the innovations that may soon be part of our daily lives. All of this has been made possible through technologies like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and 5G networks, designed to make our lives smarter and more convenient. Some of these developments are seen around us even today, but will the demand be there going forward?
3G enabled apps, right? 4G enabled mobile communication, video calling, social media. 5G enabled AR, VR technologies. So those new technologies will come in and expand the horizon and will stimulate the market to buy new devices.
Some experts say the cycle in new developments may slow in the future, but so long as there's R&D investment, it's a phenomenon that will grow as consumers demand products to be bolder, faster, and more immersive. Kim Min-si, Business Daily, Barcelona.
Time now for a look through some important global business stories from the week. And for that, we're now joined by Eunice Kim in the studio. Hello, Eunice.
Hello, June.
All right, so all eyes are on Janet Yellen on this Friday as she is set to give a speech in Boston. And this, as a Fed rate hike this month, seems to be back on the table.
You're absolutely right. Those odds, we really saw them shoot up this week. And at the very least, March is shaping up to be a live meeting. Here's why.
After the rise comes the fall. Wednesday's record-busting performance on Wall Street was followed by a day of profit-taking as investors weighed the realities of a potential rate hike in 2 weeks. Indeed, the year's first FOMC interest rate increase is looking to come fairly soon. Bloomberg's odds put a March hike past 90% today from under 20% last week, a rapid rise as economic indicators underlined improvement. Critically, the Fed's preferred inflation measure, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, came very close to the central bank's 2% target, 1.9% in January, the highest it has been in 4 years. With the world's #1 economy also closing in on full employment and low unemployment, future expectations were reinforced when a manufacturing index rose to the highest since 2014 last month. And with a string of Fed presidents striking an unusually uniform hawkish tone this week, it was Lael Brainard's comments that finally convinced markets the March meeting was truly live. At Harvard, the usually dovish Fed governor noted, quote, assuming continued progress, it will likely be appropriate soon to remove additional accommodation, continuing on a gradual path. And it's not just the U.S. economy that's heating up. Germany logged its highest annual inflation last month in 4.5 years, as the Eurozone is expected to eclipse 2% for February. Notably, out today for the first time since December of 2015, Japan's core consumer price index returned to positive territory at 0.1% year over year. All reasons why many will be looking for any hints Fed Chair Janet Yellen will give to push those odds toward 100%.
So like you said, both the U.S. and other major economies look to be heating up. And as we heard today, Korea's February inflation also reached 1.9%. So what could be the overall impact on the Korean economy then?
So before I answer that, there is one thing to consider when we look at these inflation figures, and that is the base effect, since the comparison prices were fairly low last year. And as far as the impact goes, the first element many look to is the foreign exchange rates. The dollar has already been strengthening on the week's news flow, and against the Korean won, it's gained nearly 2%, exceeding 1,151 to the greenback this week at its peak. Now, industry watchers are expecting that rate to continue to rise, as the Fed has said it is planning 3 rate hikes this year, and as U.S. President Donald Trump has been consistent with his protectionist posture. Now, his first joint address of Congress this week was short on details, though he did reiterate a $1 trillion promise for infrastructure projects, as well as a, quote, massive tax relief plan. His Commerce Secretary pick, billionaire Wilbur Ross, was finally confirmed and sworn in earlier this week. Ross is expected to lead America's trade renegotiations, as well as address the trade deficits Trump has spoken out against.
And finally, let's head over to the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Theresa May has hit a snag on her Brexit timeline.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The House of Lords on Thursday voted down May's Brexit bill, which would essentially allow the Prime Minister to trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty to begin official negotiations. But the upper house voted 358 to 256 to include an amendment that aims to guarantee the rights of EU nationals to stay in Britain even after the country leaves the EU. The bill would then return to the House of Commons after full deliberations, where lawmakers could remove the upper house's changes. While notable, markets are not viewing this as a watershed moment that could upend Brexit, though it could prolong the parliamentary process. The May government has said it is determined to follow through without any amendments to the original Brexit bill.
Well, she definitely sounds very determined to get this through. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Sure thing.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back next week with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.